What's up, everybody? So today I'm continuing with my beginner's cooking series, and today we're doing something a little bit harder than what I've done previously. Today we're going to learn how to make our own pasta from scratch. So, how do we make pasta from scratch?
So we have 2 cups of flour, 3 eggs, some salt, some olive oil, and a little bit of extra flour for dusting. So I'm going to start off by, we'll start with beating the eggs. These should be beaten before you put them into the flour, just so it's a little more evenly mixed. And then you take your surface, dust your surface a little bit.
And what we're using right now is one of the silicone mats that you use for baking, just so it's not sticking.
You dump the flour in a pile in the middle.
So now we're dumping the 2 cups and making a little hole right in the middle.
And then slowly you put a little bit of egg in at a time. It's a little bit more than I wanted.
So you don't want to fill it all the way up because it'll be too much all at once. So we'll just do about an egg's worth at a time and just use your fork to mix it around.
And you just kind of comb the edges a little bit to incorporate some of the flour in there. Mix it up a little bit. And again, I put a little too much to start off with. The bowl kind of tipped. You can kind of see how some of the edges are falling off a little bit.
But if you think about it, especially for, you know, if you're a beginning cook or you want to try something new, there's literally 3 or 4 ingredients. You know, fresh pasta is vastly better than the pasta you just boil that you buy in the store. So, and this recipe can be used for really any type of pasta that you want to make. If you want to make spaghetti, fettuccine, linguine, really anything. We even use this recipe for ravioli. And it's the same process, but really all you do is just cut the pasta a different way.
At this point, you probably take your hands, it's kind of a messy process, and you just start kneading it together. And this is really mixing all of the ingredients together and incorporating or developing some of the gluten within the flour. And at this point, it's starting to feel a little bit dry and flaky, so I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil to it. A little bit on. Should be good. You don't want to completely saturate it in oil because then it's going to get a little bit too slippery and a little too wet. So you want to kind of, if you feel like you need it, do a little bit at a time until you've got the texture that you need.
So what kind of texture are we looking for?
We're looking for an even doughy texture that's a little bit dry, a little bit wet, kind of sticky. And I'm still kind of flaking off a little bit here, so at this point I'm going to add a little bit more.
So kind of like a sugar cookie.
Yeah.
That's sort of the dough that we're looking for. If you've ever made sugar cookies before, kind of that. It's not, it's moist to the touch. Sorry for using that word if it makes people cringe, but it's not falling apart if you let it sit. It's still a dough, but it has some moisture to it. You don't want really dry pasta because it's gonna fall apart and it just won't cook, or it won't when we put it through the press later, it won't press right. Whereas if it has a bit of moisture to it, then it's going to be a little bit easier to process and to make into actual, I think we're doing fettuccine today.
Mm-hmm. Also, we want to avoid ripping when it goes through the pasta press.
Yeah. One huge benefit of this is it's few ingredients. It's really easy to make. I mean, Bethany's putting her work in right now. But when you go to cook it, it's not like the boxed pasta where it takes 30 minutes to boil it. It's maybe a couple minutes in the water, and then that's it. It's done. You drain it, and then it's ready to eat.
Usually takes about 2 minutes.
Or in the open?
I believe it's in the refrigerator.
Okay.
That way the gluten will continue to develop. The texture will smooth out a little bit, smooth out a little bit, and then go from there. So I'm just going to, I think
No, it's just flour. We could put it in there, put plastic wrap.
The recipe I just watched wrapped it up in plastic wrap, but I try to avoid using plastic wrap, so I think what I'm going to do is just take a cloth, dampen it, and then put it in the fridge on top of the bowl so that it doesn't dry out. You do not want to let it dry out because then it'll flake and it'll fall apart completely.
So now that the pasta dough has been sitting in the fridge for 30 minutes, we are going to take it out and run it through a press to flatten it out. Now this is a pasta press. Obviously, fancy piece of equipment. They make them so they attach to the front of KitchenAid mixers, and they also make electric ones as well. You can do this whole process with a rolling pin, but just have some strong forearms and some patience because it's going to take a lot longer than using this pasta press. These are fairly inexpensive. I'd say
Start at $30.
Yeah, probably running around $30. And then obviously the fancier you get, or if they attach to a KitchenAid, they're going to get a bit more expensive. All right, so obviously we kept our dough in this moist rag so that it kept its moisture while it was cooling and make it difficult. So here she's putting down a bit of flour just to make this easy to work. That's also going to help it run through the press because it's going to be it's going to have like a slick coating to it rather than the dough. I mean, if you've ever made sugar cookies, it's a very similar process where you're just putting down flour, kneading the dough. So obviously, since this is a lot of dough to make pasta, we're going to cut this into smaller chunks just to make it a little bit easier to work. So of that around softball size piece of dough, we cut it down into quarters. They're probably around the size of a lacrosse ball, maybe?
Smaller, tennis ball. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're similar size.
Regardless.
So on your on most pasta presses, they have numbers on the side on a little knob here, and the larger the number, the wider the press goes. I don't know if you want to. So as we kind of pull those numbers down, it gets smaller. So this is a 1, whereas this is a 7. You have a handle here that can come on and off. It will detach, and then it'll attach into the other 2 settings. So the base of this is pretty heavy as well. So
So what she's doing is just flattening it out a little bit to make it easier to feed through the actual press itself. If it's not working through, it could just be that it's a little bit difficult, or it's not set up correctly. If it's in a ball, sometimes it just makes it really difficult to feed through. So obviously that's what, a 7?
Mm-hmm. So then each time you go down a number. And then the way that I've heard is a good way to tell, I mean, it's really depending on your personal preference, but once you can start to see your fingers through the dough, that's when it should be pretty good. So, I mean, we kind of can, but I think I prefer it a little bit thinner.
So we're gonna move it down. What number are we at now?
We're at a 4.
Okay, so now we're down to a 4. Also, one thing that's important to think about, angel hair pasta is obviously gonna be a lot thinner than linguine, so, or pappardelle or something like that. So you're gonna want to thin out something like angel hair a lot more. Alright, so I'd say that's probably about good.
I'd say we go down to 3.
One more? Alright, so we're going down to a 3. And one thing that's important, as you could tell, she's working this dough a lot and handling it a lot. When you're, sorry, I have an itch on my eyebrow. When you're handling it this much, it's always important to keep flour on your hands so that the moisture on your hands isn't causing the pasta dough to get sticky.
Okay, so now we have a nice thin piece we can see our hands through. And then, do you want to do thin or thick?
Let's do thick. So she's going to move the handle to this, and these have little cutters on it. And as you feed it through the roller, it's just going to take this big flat one piece of dough and cut it into little strips.
Hands.
So we have one important thing. If you're gonna make fresh pasta, at least make homemade sauce. If you're putting jarred sauce on it, there's really no point in making homemade pasta. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Try making pasta at home. I hope this helps. And when all is said and done, manja.